Welcome back, everybody, to the Bacon and Egg Show, episode 66, October 23rd, 2021. Guys, what is going on? Jay, Mike, glad to have you back. Got a big
What's
show today.
up?
How y'all doing?
What's up? Big show. We've been looking forward to this one for a while, and thanks to Mike, we got so hyped up for basketball last year that we totally bought in. And then we were just talking about our favorite one shining moment, part of the video from Shaka. But we're moving on, only positive from here on out.
Hey.
And
Before we get too
hey,
far on that,
yeah.
this team made the tournament last year. That was
Oh God.
like, after the previous seasons, like, what all can you ask for? This team made the tournament.
Well, I can ask him to beat Abilene Christian, but that's another story. Mike, what's up, brother? Thanks for joining us today. How are you, man?
I'm ready to talk some basketball, guys, instead of this football crap we've been witnessing over the past few weeks. So. But yeah, no, just appreciate you guys having me back on. Excited to, get to talking about what should hopefully be an exciting season and maybe a one shining moment.
Yes.
But yeah, so.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
let's
get hyped up, baby.
Yeah, for sure. So let's get this pulled up real quick and we'll kind of get this going here.
The Runnin Horns 21-22 season, the farewell voyage of the Frank Irwin Center.
Nobody is going to miss that place. Like,
bring the wrecking ball.
Bring in Miley Cyrus too.
Might as well, right?
Why not?
But yeah, let's get into this here. This was kind of an eventful off season for the Runnin Horns after the however you want to refer to it, unceremonious exit from the first round of the NCAA tournament against Abilene Christian. Shaka wasn't fired per se, but he found a pretty soft landing spot at Marquette. We're not going to get a ton into Shaka because we did that last season, but it's, wish him luck at Marquette. This program, let's get into what we're looking at now, like the hiring of Chris Beard. Before we get into that, like, in you guys' opinion, I mean, this is probably the most accomplished coach in terms of resume, NCAA wise, that like Texas has hired for the basketball program, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like that when we talk about the way that Texas basketball has fit into the grand scheme of things, whether it's just on this campus or on the national scene, I think we felt like when Shaka was hired, that might be the next step to be able to take. You get a guy that had some tournament success, a little bit anyway, and was a good recruiter, could do all those things, players coach. So it almost felt like that was going to be the big step. Well, it turns out that if this goes the way that Texas and Texas basketball fans want it to go, that Shaka was that stepping stone to take this program to the next level in terms of hiring an established coach, that has, been there before, has shown the ability to do it season after season after season with consistency. Not talking about Rick Barnes here in terms of sort of a sustained sort of, if whatever level of success that you want to say that Rick Barnes had here, which was, good for Texas basketball. But we're talking about here Chris Beard sort of elevating Texas from just being known, that's definitely a football school, Mike, to now, they want this program could be on the horizon of competing with football in terms of being an every year contender for big things.
Yeah, I mean, what a crazy end of the year last year to losing a bunch of guys to the NBA, to not knowing what kind of roster you're going to have, to hiring Chris Beard, to all of a sudden being ranked number 5 in the AP preseason poll. So quite the roller coaster this offseason. I think the biggest thing for me is obviously going to be how everyone fits in together. These 8 transfers that kind of came in. The continuity was there last year with all these guys coming up together. We kind of saw how that maybe was hindered by Shaka's ability to make in-game adjustments. So hoping Chris Beard can kind of come in here and, be able to make those adjustments. And he demands defense. This team, one of the weaknesses, and we'll kind of talk about it a little bit later, is going to be how does this team defend? But I think, last season, sour taste in the mouth after you come off the Big 12 tourney win. You get a 3 seed. You got national pundits talking Final Four. You had the bracket set up, and you just fell flat on your face. So, yeah, I mean, Shaka wasn't fired, but I think it was obviously a mutual agreement for him.
Right.
Best interest to take the Marquette job. And then, yeah, I mean, the doors just kind of opened up for Chris Beard. You know, he obviously wanted to be here, and yeah, I mean, I was more in the camp. I think we all were kind of in the camp of Royal Ivy potentially being the coach here, but just the way that Chris Beard kind of assembled this roster is nothing short of amazing. So if you look at it here, I mean, we're projected second in the Big 12. You know, you got some guys on Marcus Carr on the first team, and we'll talk about him a little bit later. And just a lot of exciting times with the final year right now about to happen at FEC, which I think you guys will be in attendance quite often. Is that right?
That's correct.
Oh,
yeah. We got media
Yeah.
credentials for this season. So luckily the show's been helping us out a little bit. We'll be, you know, right there at the scores table next to Craig Way and Eddie Orrin and the crew, just, you know, doing our media duties there. So
maybe not that close.
Maybe not that close. I think we'll actually be like
in
the upper deck, but
yeah, we will be in the building though for a lot of games for sure.
Yeah,
we'll be there.
So hey, let me get you guys' thoughts on where y'all are at as far as like how the offseason kind of transpired to, you know, essentially kind of putting together this roster, and all of a sudden you become a top 5 team in the country to start.
Kerry, I wanted to get your take on this. The coaching hire, where, you know, we thought maybe we would get a different look at that. Do you feel like that Beard, you know, in terms of looking at either one of those guys to come in who we thought, who was definitely in the final 2 there, do you feel like that this ended up being the better hire, even though maybe at times we thought Ivy could be that guy? Like, how are you feeling about this?
Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously there's still games left to play, and like we haven't seen this team on the court. We haven't seen like multiple seasons of what Chris Beard's program looks like. So without knowing any of that stuff, like, I think it's surpassed my expectations in terms of, you know, I think the big thing with Ivy was like, you know, this is a guy that really knows the program recently. He's a guy that, you know, won things at Texas, that had deep tournament runs, that, you know, he knows what it takes to get this program back to, you know, the level that fans want it to be at. But I think Chris Beard, I think my concern kind of with him was, you know, how is he going to build the roster? You know, what he did at Tech in terms of recruiting. Yeah, he got some high-end recruits, but like, you know, it was kind of the level of what Texas Tech would be recruiting to Lubbock, you know? So would that transfer to Texas? And what he's done coming in, obviously the culture stuff. I mean, he's a guy that went to school here. He gets it. He kind of gets what it is taking to engage the students. We're seeing the fireside chat stuff, which is fantastic content. But like, and we're going to get to the roster in a minute, but the way that he's built this roster, it's kind of like, I mean, do you think Royal Ivy would have been able to do the same thing? Yeah, where Ivy probably would have been a longer process of like rebuilding the program and kind of getting it running to where he'd want it to run, where like, this is kind of an instant, like, just add water and here you go. And now you have a top 5 team in the country type thing. And if he's able to do that and then put together a good season and a deep tournament run, the sky's the limit for him. Because, and that's what I mentioned about like, this program, I don't think he's ever hired a coach that's been this accomplished before they got to Texas. I mean, he's had a national title game appearance. He's taken Tech on deep tournament runs. You know, as great as Rick Barnes was at Texas, he didn't have that before. You know, Shaka Smart had the one Final Four appearance with VCU, but like, he didn't have the sustained success. And this is a coach that's coming in that's like in the middle of his prime as a coach, and he's still a relatively young guy that could really get this thing flying. So yeah, to answer your question, like, it seems like, you know, this is probably the right hire in this stage of being in retrospect, where maybe a few years down the road it's different, but this feels like the right hire at the right time, and the stars aligned for it. So yeah, Mike, Jay, what do you guys think about that? I mean, because all of us were pretty high on Royal Ivy.
Absolutely. And Mike, I think that was, Kerry made the point that I was alluding to in terms of it being the right time and right place, right time, and sort of with the win now attitude that Texas supporters almost always have. You know, I don't think that this place coming off of sort of a, I don't know how to describe Shaka's run here, but it wasn't a winning tenure, you know. So with Texas supporters really hungry to see that, after we thought that maybe we would get, you know, a sustained build out of Shaka Smart, it makes me feel, especially seeing after Beard, what Beard has done in a short amount of time in terms of recruiting, changing the culture and all that stuff, that Ivy might have had to take more time to build this up. And it seems like Beard was definitely ended up being the right guy.
Yeah, I think the All-Stars kind of aligned. I mean, you look at the one-time transfer rule now in effect, and that's something that Chris Beard is really good at. So he was able to build a roster that can compete and quickly. And I think that's kind of going to be the new wave of college basketball, even football. I mean, all the sports really. That the opportunity for someone to, a really, really good player to transfer and be a program changer can happen overnight, it seems like. So, I think the stars aligned. I think Royal Ivy probably would have been interesting on the recruiting trail, would have been a longer process. I think he eventually would have been successful, but you know, here in Texas, we are not into waiting. I mean, we're almost ready to get rid of Sark, it seems like, right? So, I mean, guy hasn't even had his recruits sign paperwork yet. So but that comes with the responsibility of being at Texas. So, I mean, you're going to have these big expectations. I just think it's going to be interesting to see how this entire season kind of plays out. And the thing that I'm most excited about is, and we're going to talk about this right now, is the roster. I mean, this roster if you're a college basketball fan, it's an exciting roster. If you're an NBA fan, last year's roster was exciting, high flying. All three guys are in the league now. Brown, Jones, Sims, all made the roster. They put a graphic up on Twitter the other day, and it's like, man, how many athletic bigs are in the NBA? Shaka was really, really good at getting athletic bigs. I think he got like 5 or 6 starting centers in the NBA from Texas. So this is going to be a different look roster, a different team. I think something that Texas has been missing is we've always had the big man or the big, Durant, or, the center, the power forward. We haven't really had other than maybe a DJ Augustine, a star point guard. Matt Coleman was really good in his time here, really good, solid basketball player. But Marcus Carr, I mean, I'm surprised he came back. He's a transfer from Minnesota, 6'2", averaged almost 20 points a game. It's for a Minnesota team that didn't have much to go with him. So I'm excited to watching, somebody that can put it on the deck and really create things. So he's really exciting. He's first team all Big 12. So I'm just ready to kind of see what Beard can do with him and the rest of these guys that he kind of brought in. What are your guys' thoughts on Marcus Carr?
I mean, it's incredible to get a player like that at this stage of his career, for a coaching staff that's like new on campus. Like, could you ask for a better scenario? Like a player of his caliber to just so happen to be available on the transfer market to come in into a year where, obviously the wins and stuff are going to be an expectation, but it's about culture setting, and it's about getting the program started off on the right foot. So you get a guy like this to come in, I know we'll get into these other players, but also beyond Marcus Carr. I mean, the rest of these players that have come in transfer wise, couldn't ask for a better scenario. And Carr is just he's the diamond of the group, but it's incredible to me. How to get a player like that, Yeah,
I'm surprised. I mean, he had opportunities to go professional, and I think the biggest thing that he sold and what he talked about at Big 12 Media Days was that the NBA wants to see him win. I don't think it's about his skill set. He's an above average athlete. He can score. He's a great passer. He's got a really good handle. I think the one thing that scouts want to see from him at the next level is that he's a winner. I mean, that's what you want out of your point guard, a leader, someone that, and him coming into this situation, having all these guys, if he can put this together, have a really great season, he's got a chance to be a high second round pick. So Jay, what are your thoughts on Marcus Carr?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat in terms of just kind of being surprised that he was even available for a conversation. And we've learned early in Chris Beard's tenure that he's that closer. He's that dude. Like, he is the recruiter. If we're to tie it into football, the recruiter that Texas hired Steve Sarkisian to be is that recruiter that Chris Beard has already shown to be in 5 months, 6 months or whatever, to put this roster together and to land Marcus Carr, who basically was by many accounts the most sought after person in the transfer portal period, to be able to get a talent like that on campus who averaged 19.5 points at Minnesota last year, but is not just a scorer. There's a lot more to his game than that. And I feel like we're going to see Chris Beard get even more out of Marcus Carr this year, which is going to allow a guy like Courtney Ramey to not have to have the ball in his hands so much, to be able to play more of that to do what Courtney Ramey does best.
It's that
When
rainy ball, man.
That Ramey ball, hashtag Ramey ball. When you get guys on campus that will immediately make the other people around them better and allow them to use their skill sets to benefit this team the most, that's just as big of an impact for me as somebody that comes in averaging 19, 20 points a game. Because you look at this projected starting lineup, looking at last season's scoring averages, Marcus Carr 19.4, Courtney Ramey 12.2, Andrew Jones 14.6, Timmy Allen 17.2, Trey Mitchell 18.8. Those averages will not stay that way. There's not enough basketballs to go around. I don't care how great your team is to sustain that. So knowing that, and the sell job that Chris Beard had to do and I know I'm jumping around off a Carr a little bit here, but the selling job that Beard had to do to get all of these guys on campus, knowing that their personal statistics might take a hit, and Carr's might too, but it'll be for the better of this team, of this program. And I feel like these NBA scouts, if winning is a thing that they needed to see out of Carr for them to know that he's that dude for them, then he's set up right now to give them that in this situation with the talent that's around him, the coaching staff that's around him. Carr was the best get in the country out of the portal, and there's a star that's on campus right now that you don't normally see, like you were mentioning, Kerry, at this point in his career. He's a made man already.
Yeah.
And for him to come in with that skill set, with that ability, with that notoriety to land on campus, and you already know what you're going to get out of him, that's one of the reasons why Texas is favored, or obviously picked second by the coaches and the media or pick second in the Big 12. But, depending on where you look at some of these national pundits, some have Texas as high as 3 in the country. And Carr, with everybody around him right now, it is a big reason why for me. So, yeah, no, Carr was such a great get. And like I said, you look at the rest of this roster that we're going to get into, and it's like Carr is going to allow these players to do what they do best and just let him sort of run the show. And we're not even talking about, an Andrew Jones yet, that is his cancer, overcoming cancer is a great story. It's inspirational. There's a lot of stuff that goes around that. I hope it's not going to totally overshadow how great of a basketball player Andrew Jones is, because he's a great, great basketball player. And we're going to see that again this year, because he's not going to have all that pressure that he's had in years previously, because guys like Carr and Allen and Mitchell and, young guys like Askew off the bench and Febris, who is one of the best shooters in the country, period. I mean, these guys, I'm jumping around here, but you can tell there's excitement around this roster, man. And anyways, let's hit on a couple more of these guys. Why don't we hit on a couple of these returners in the starting lineup and Ramey and Jones. I've sort of said my piece. What are y'all's outlook for them this year?
Yeah, I just want to hit real quick on those guys, the returning players. Like you mentioned Andrew Jones, like this is an opportunity for him this season to really cement his legacy at Texas.
Yeah.
And like if this team can go on and do some things that haven't been done in a long time, he'll be looked at and remembered as one of those guys. Like he'll be up there in that, when we talk about guys like Royale Ivy, in those kind of players that spent a long time on campus, that won a lot of games and put together deep runs and all those things, so he's got that going for him. I love that Cunningham, you got Brock with the 1.6 point per game on there.
Yes.
Like it's fantastic. Maybe we should have put up like grit per game or something, like something that flatters him a little bit more. But still these guys, like, just looking at the projected starters and even beyond that, like 4 seniors and a junior. Like we talk about teams that make deep runs in the tournament. People always go, oh, well, you the one and dones, it's hard to win, national championships with one and done type players. You got to have experience. You got to have these guys that have been on campus, been around and all that. There it is. It's right there. And you're going to have guys like Carr that are a senior that have played their entire college careers. And now this is their shot to go win some trophies. And they're not going to let this opportunity slip away with them without a fight. And so, and neither are guys like Ramey and Febris and Cunningham, these guys that have been through the battles and are ready to make something of it. And I don't know. It's exciting. I just think it's exciting from that sense. Exciting. Like even, take obviously the talent factor is huge here with these players that have come in, but like just the experience level. Right. Like these are not guys that are gonna just fold in difficult moments. They've been through the battles, they've been through adversity, and now they're at that point where they go, man, this is it. Like this is the last run at this. And it's exciting from that point.
Yeah, these are great college basketball players. You look at it and you talk about this backcourt. You hit on Ramey a little bit. So last year, Ramey sometimes was super frustrating, but you have to look at last year's roster and know that Courtney Ramey, essentially, other than Matt Coleman, was the only really other player that could really create for the bigs, because the bigs were athletic. Greg Brown could shoot a little bit from the outside. Kai could shoot a little bit from the outside. Jericho, he was just a straight pick and roll guy. So when you have those guys out on the court, it really forced Ramey and Coleman to take a lot of deep shots. What you're going to find here is that Timmy Allen can basically run your offense. He's the transfer in from Utah, averaged 17 points a game, over 6 rebounds a game, almost 5 assists a game. So you can run your offense through him. So pick and rolls with these guys, they can pop, they can roll the basket, you can play them on the elbow. And then Trey Mitchell is a great passer. And if that's your starting big, you're going to sacrifice what Sims gave you in defense and rebounding and athleticism, but you're going to get a more efficient offense. You're not going to go on these 4 or 5 minute droughts, which really killed the Texas offense last year. And so that's what I think the most exciting thing about it is that 1 through 5 in this projected starting lineup, all these guys can shoot, they can all pass, they can all score. So really it's just about getting these guys to play together and, knowing where their spots are. Any night one of these guys could drop 25 to 30 points. Like nobody would be surprised if Trey Mitchell, dropped 30 points or if, Jones dropped a 25 piece. So the burden is not all on Ramey anymore. And I think that's really going to open up his offensive game, because there were times last year where he absolutely took over games. And there were times last year where, he probably cost us some games. So I'm looking forward to kind of seeing his progression and how Beard kind of handles him, because he's not going to have to be as ball dominant if he's going to play with Carr and Jones in the backcourt and Timmy Allen. You got 4 guys that you can literally handle the ball. And Trey Mitchell, you can run your offense through him through the post too. So there's just so many options in so many ways. I think it's going to make Ramey more efficient. And I'm interested to see him in pick and roll situations with Allen and Mitchell. It's super exciting. So, and then we talk about, I
was just going to say, we hadn't even hit on, what was it, the SEC's leading rebounder coming in with Disu. Like we hadn't even hit on that guy yet in terms of like someone that's, I mean, another experienced player that played in a major conference and led him in rebounding. You have that guy coming in and he's
Off
not
the
even in the
bench,
projected.
potentially.
Yeah, he's on the projected bench. It's
And
Yeah, no,
it's
when we
crazy.
talk about bench players here, I think somebody that didn't get as much run as some of these other names, just because he hasn't necessarily shown it as much yet. His minutes at Kentucky were few and far between for him as a freshman. But Devin Askew, he reclassified, got to Kentucky early. His game is still evolving as a young guard. And that to me he's one of those guys where if you get the best of Devin Askew coming in, these bench and starters, it's almost like it's an interchangeable thing where you could almost see there being sometimes where Beard just goes 5 for 5 subs just to throw something at another team. And because it's doable. I mean, Jalen Tyson, freshman, has been, he's going to have to earn his minutes, but all of these players up and down, whether you're looking at the starters or the bench, they all do certain things well. Even though they haven't played together, I totally agree that the continuity maybe being a weakness early on, but the word out of camp and the word from everybody that we're hearing is that these guys are already playing like they love each other, that they care about each other, that all they want to do is win, that it's all that they're selfless. This is a team that is formed to win immediately, obviously, with the seniors in the starting lineup and Trey Mitchell as a junior. This is a roster that if this goes well, like there's a reason why this team is ranked so high in the preseason polls. And when we talk about this bench, Askew, a sophomore, he's barely 19 years old. Jay Shepherd's one of the best shooters in the country. Tyson, a very high recruit coming in, and that Chris Beard absolutely loves. Brock Cunningham, the glue. We joke about him being the grit guy, the floor burning guy, and all that stuff. You got to have guys like Brock Cunningham on your team. Longhorn Weekly this week, Chris Beard was talking about Brock Cunningham, and obviously he was the first guy that was basically committed to be back for this team. And Chris Beard said, well, I called him and he didn't answer. I called him and he didn't answer. I sent him some texts and he didn't answer. And he said, I got worried. But it turns out that after the season was over, Cunningham sort of went on this one-man road trip and, sort of wrapped it up. And, one of those things that a Brock Cunningham type
Grit
would do,
World Tour.
just go out on his own and, and do his own thing just by himself and sort of get his mind right and all that stuff. And when Brock Cunningham comes back, Chris Beard said, we took our first team picture and it was Chris Beard and Brock Cunningham. I know we look at the stats that are on the screen. I know that he's not going to drop 14 a night, but he is going to play such a huge role on this team. He's that guy that's been here. He's been around. You got to have guys like that on a roster that are willing to give it all up and not get the box score stats, not get all of that. And I'm so excited that with all of these transfers that have come in, with the highly touted players that stuck around, that you got a guy like Brock Cunningham that will be there to clean up the mess, to get on the floor, to get dirty, to set that example for what's expected of a winning basketball team. So you take all the accolades that all these rest of these guys have, and I still want a Brock Cunningham on this team. You can chop it up however you want. This is an extremely talented roster, and we're going to learn early on if this is clicked or not. I think it's going to be really evident early on if this is clicked or not. And I just feel like we're going to see, this is going to be poetry in motion. I feel like, because everybody's talents just complement each other.
Well, I just want to hit on something that you've mentioned there here quickly before we wrap up the first segment here, but it definitely seems like Chris Beard has been, like, in addition to obviously the clear talent that he's been bringing in, but there's a specific kind of personality
Mhm.
that he seems to be recruiting towards as well. And in terms of how this team gels, like, it seems that there's very specific, like, he wants a very specific type of personality in a player. And like, these are guys that are hungry to win something, and they're selfless. There's, we talked about Carr. That's a guy that could have gone pro, could have said, all right, I had my run at Minnesota. I'm going to go make some money, try to go to the league. Well, this is a guy that wants to win things. He's hungry to win. You talk about someone like Askew that was a big recruit, goes to Kentucky, doesn't see the minutes he wants. He's hungry. If you can get the best out of him, like Jay was mentioning, it's just another piece of the puzzle. And I just want to mention on Tyson, the luxury of this team not having to rely on a freshman right out of the gate.
Yep.
How many times did we talk about, and I know, Greg Brown was, highly touted. I mean, we're a one and done level type player that, like, if he wasn't going, the team didn't seem to be going at times. And as nice as it is to have those, like, one and done level 5-star recruits come in and contribute immediately, isn't it nice to not have to rely on true freshmen, going into the season? Now Tyson might put together some crucial minutes and, like, performances and become a crucial
Absolutely.
piece of this team. But going into the season, you have to go, oh God, well, kind of how this season goes is going to rely on if our freshmen can, like, exceed expectations. It's nice having to say, all right, Tyson can just work him into the system, work him into the rotation. And if he becomes a solid contributor, great. It's nice. And I think it's a credit to Beard and how he's built this roster. It's amazing what he's done in such a short time.
Yeah, you remember the offseason where we were just like, okay, Cunningham's back. It's like, okay, Jones and Ramey. Oh, Askew's coming on. I mean, that's a good developmental player there.
Right.
It's like, oh, Timmy Allen. Okay, that's really good. That'll maybe get us into the top 25. And then, you get news. Oh, Dylan DeSuit wants to come back home. That's great. And then next text is like, wow, Trey Mitchell's literally coming. And then you get the linchpin of the whole Marcus Carr, and you're just like, what just happened here? So I think, yeah, I mean, this roster is a great college basketball roster. It's not going to be as athletic. It's going to be, if they're able to play together and get this motion offense down, they should be one of the highest scoring teams in the country. It would be a major disappointment with the skill set that all of these guys have to not be a top 10 type scoring offense. The thing that, troublesome for me is kind of figuring out where the defense is. And that's why I think Brock is so important to this team, because he's going to play significant minutes and big time matchups against other high scoring teams, because he's going to need to lock down some of these guys that, Texas is going to be challenging if they're going to make a deep run. So he is super important. I did put the 1.6 points per game up there because, yeah, it's not about, he's so important to this team. It's not about him scoring a basket. He
right.
doesn't even average.
Right.
He doesn't even average a basket. So
Right.
me and him almost averaged the same amount of points in college. So, but you look at you pop on the tape and it's like, good Lord, man, this guy is just, hopefully his defense kind of permeates throughout the team.
Yes.
The development of Trey Mitchell and his defense is going to be crucial. DC's a great rebounder. He's one of the more athletic players. He's going to, have to play some significant minutes. And then we haven't even talked about Christian Bishop, who is probably going to get I don't know where you're finding all these minutes for these guys. It's going to be interesting. It's going to shake itself down. He's probably going to be super important when you play a Drew Timme from Gonzaga, which we'll talk about in a little bit, because he's probably the best athlete on the team. High flyer, can rebound, plays above the rim. Coming in from Creighton, a transfer, they made a Sweet 16 run, and you're just like, man, you're just bringing in all these guys, and you're gonna, obviously depth is going to be amazing for this team, but I think that if someone goes down, you've got so many options and so many answers, and yeah, you have experience. And I think that's the biggest thing to take away from this roster is all these guys, and Kerry kind of touched on it, they all want to win at this point. They've all gotten the accolades. Marcus Carr, first team all Big Ten. Timmy Allen, first team all Pac-12. Trey Mitchell, first team all A-10. So it's like, these guys are all accomplished. And I think that the main thing and what Chris Beard is selling is that the opportunity to win. And I think the way college basketball is moving, you looked at the two teams that played for it all, Baylor and Gonzaga. Baylor was really great defensively, but they were really good at scoring the basketball, and Gonzaga was really good at scoring the basketball. And I think at the end of the day, great offense in college basketball, just with the way the game's played and the rules and the three-point ball, is going to beat, on most days, great defense. But there's going to be some days where the shots aren't falling, and you're going to have to lock some teams down. And that's where I think Cunningham and some of these bigs are really going to have to make an impact. So.
Well, and Chris Beard, I think, hit on that during Big 12 Media Days, talking about like just how important defense is in the tournament. Because I think he said something like, you're not going to get 6-7 games in a row of shooting lights out. Like, you have to be able to shut the other team down as well, because you're going to go cold at some point. And I mean, that's just the nature of the sport. You're not going to hit them all. But I think, I think you talked about like the defense and making sure that kind of gets rounded into form. If there was one thing that you would trust a Chris Beard coach team to be able to figure out, it's how to operate defensively, right? Like, that's what we've seen from him. So I think, we talked about, Mike, you especially, like with this hire and throughout this offseason, about how the offense is kind of like, what is Chris Beard's offense going to do? And I think that was kind of the like, okay, we saw what he did at Tech, but is he going to be able to get this team to score enough points? I think now that we see the roster, I mean, I think we feel pretty good about that, because I trust the guy to get a defensive system going. I think they're going to play great defense, because that's just what he demands out of his players and how he coaches his program. That's the foundation of it. So I trust him to get that part figured out. And yeah, I mean, if they can hit these shots and they can get this rotation going, I think this roster is set up really, really, really well. So
I think you made the right point there in terms of what he demands, what's expected.
Right.
The expectation is to do that. It's not to go out and score 85 a night. The expectation is to play defense, to play good team basketball, and then everything else revolves around that. So great point.
Well, and there's enough depth there that if you're not doing that job, if you're not putting it together at the defensive end of the court and doing your job that way, there's somebody else on that bench that's hungry to play that'll come in and do it.
Yep.
And so that's another luxury with the depth on this roster, to be able to say, okay, you're not cutting it until you start playing solid defense, sit. And he'll get that. So,
yep.
Well, man, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, let's talk about this schedule, because you mentioned a little teaser there. We're going to find out pretty quickly about how this team is gelling. So let's get into that. Guys, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Let's do it.
Welcome back, everybody. Bacon and Egg Show, Texas Longhorn basketball preview special. Farewell to the Frank Irwin Center edition. All right, guys, let's pick it back up. We just hit on the roster. We talked about our, kind of excitement. I think it's pretty apparent over what Chris Beard has built this offseason, what this team's looking like. Let's talk about what's actually going to happen on the court. Let's get into the schedule here. Mike, what do you got? Let me get you going here. But let's get into the schedule, because Jay, you hit on it. We're going to find out pretty quickly what exactly this team looks like against top competition. It's going to, a couple, an exhibition and then a, pretty straightforward home opener to get going. But then you look at it right there on that schedule, November 13th, a little trip to Spokane to face the national title game appearance, the national title runners up. And I mean, God, they're entering this season ranked number 1, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So the number 1 team in the country, there's a chance to go on the road into their building and really see where, at least early on, this team fits into that picture.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was the second game of the year. I mean, exciting times on November 13th. You're really going to get to see some fireworks in this game. And yeah, true. Measuring stick early on, I think this team is going to look way different towards the end of the year,
right,
as they continue to play together. But I think it's just an interesting barometer to be set. And yeah, I mean, what better way than to find out against a team that returns, Drew Timme is probably the National Player of the Year this year. I mean, they're bringing Chet Holmgren, who's going to be a top 3 NBA pick. So Yeah, I mean it's an early test. I kind of like what the schedule is this year. The schedule last year you had the Maui Invitational. This year is more of a traditional type run here, where you're going to have some you're going to have some cupcakes, kind of build the roster continuity together. You get the trip to Seton Hall, and they're a basketball school. It's going to be an interesting matchup there, and then the homecoming for our boy Rick Barnes. Coming into town January 29th during the SEC Big 12 showdown. So yeah, that's going to be that should hopefully be a really exciting game. And yeah, you enter into Big 12 play, and I mean, as were last year, you had about 7 or 8 teams that were really, really good. This year, you're gonna have about 6 that are going to be really, really tough. So, what are you guys' thoughts on this? Kind of the early schedule and what Big 12 outlook looks like?
I love what you mentioned about, at least relating to the Gonzaga game, about how this team is going to look really different towards the end of the season. And it's a super early test for this team that's still trying to figure out how they play with each other against other opponents, and not just like in practice and playing against each other. And I think Texas goes up there and gets a win. Obviously, that's going to be tremendous. But like, we talk about like, let's adjust the expectations a little bit. This is a team that could very well go up to Gonzaga and lose this game. This is a barometer to kind of see where they're at mentally and how the system works. If Texas goes up there and loses the game, it's not going to be like, oh my God, this team isn't ready to like, make a push or anything like that. Or like, I mean, even if it's a comfortable win for Gonzaga, this is a team that's still trying to figure this out. This is, it's a long season. And I think you're absolutely right in saying that like this team will look totally different come Big 12 tournament and NCAA tournament time. So, but it's a good test. It's a great test. And I love these. I love the schedule playing out like this. Like you mentioned as well, it's kind of like the traditional schedule in terms of, some of the bigger matchups aren't happening in like neutral sites, like the game against North Carolina last year in the Maui, invitational, like those like these are good road tests, going to Seton Hall, going to Gonzaga, like going into environments that are not going to be friendly or neutral. And it's good for this team. It's a great way for them to come together.
Yeah, and I think Gonzaga is going to look a lot different at the end of the season too.
Of course.
I mean, like that's with when they're going to depend on a couple of freshmen to give big minutes. I don't think we're going to see the best of either one of those teams on November 13th. But that obviously it'll be a top 5 matchup. There'll be a lot of hype around it, and it'll be that big game feel for a program that hasn't in Texas, I should say, that hasn't exactly performed to their ranking in these big game matchups for the most part, especially out of conference. So that's one that obviously is circled on the calendar, or has been circled on the calendar for a long time. But around that, Houston Baptist, Northern Colorado, San Jose State, California Baptist, Sam Houston over at Gregory Gymnasium, which will be a fantastic environment for the students that are able to get in there.
Another credit to Chris Beard on putting that together in terms of getting student engagement and getting students in the building for a good environment.
Absolutely. Yeah. And while we're on that, he said if the student section sold out for the Houston Baptist game, that he's throwing them a party at the tower. Like it's all of these things that he's doing to engage the student body, to ensure that he's creating an environment that people don't want to play in, like going to Spokane, Washington and playing Gonzaga, like going to New Jersey and playing Seton Hall, where you go to these schools that are basketball schools and the environment shows it. That's what he's obviously trying to create. And you got to appreciate that. But yeah, no, I mean, going and looking at the schedule heading into Big 12 play, you really have the Gonzaga test, you've got Seton Hall on December 9th, Stanford December 19th. And other than that, there should be plenty of opportunities, Mike, for this team to learn to gel, to get the most out of each other, and for them to really get a feel for how they want to get things done in the best way to accomplish their goals.
Yeah, no, I do like it. It's I think it's beneficial to have the schedule set up kind of this way for this particular team. So Yeah, the road test at Stanford. So you've got some matchups there where you do go into those environments. Seton Hall, I mean, that place is they love their basketball there. So
Yeah.
and it's just an exciting time to have fans. Full capacity. You're going to see these crazy environments, and I think it's going to be great for this team to get that experience before heading into Big 12 play. And we know that the Big 12 is one of the strongest conferences in basketball. So if you look at it here, I mean, what's the thing that, the most in common here with the Big 12 is that their coaching is probably hands down the best overall coaching roster of any league, in my opinion. You got Bill Self at Kansas. You got Kerry's boy in Baylor.
My dude, man.
Oklahoma brought in Porter Moses. So Bob Huggins. I mean, Mike Boynton's doing his thing at Oklahoma State. I'm surprised Tech's not in the top 25, honestly. They actually did a really good job reassembling their roster and got some really key transfers in there. So I think they're getting a little bit slighted this year. I have them as more of a top 20 type team. I know KenPom, which is one of the major college basketball sites, they really like them this year too. So I think really you're going to have the big three challenging up at the top. I think it's really a two-team race, to be honest with you, Kansas and Texas. Baylor, losing that type of firepower, man, I mean, you got those two guys playing in the league right now. They lost kind of their Brock Cunningham and Mark Vidal. He's not there anymore. They did get the transfer from Arizona, who's a really good scorer, and they got Matthew Mayer, who's on first team Big 12 preseason watch. So, they got some talent there, but I think when you compare the two rosters, Texas should be a favorite in that game. And you look at what we talked about, what Texas did with their roster. Kansas really loaded up, getting Remy Martin. Love the name.
Great name. All-time name.
All-time name, and a great scorer. Surprise. He's like a Marcus Carr. I'm surprised these guys, playing at Arizona State, they didn't win. The guy's averaging 20 points a game, basically. Almost the same scenario as Carr. These guys are coming in. That's going to be a great matchup to watch. Marcus Carr going against Remy Martin. Super exciting. And so can Beard stay in that top two? I'm okay with the top three finish in the Big 12. But I think realistic expectations are a top two.
Yeah, and I think, scheduling wise, I mean, that's the whole thing here, right? Like you don't need this like super crazy non-conference schedule because the Big 12 is enough of a challenge as it is. Like to me, it feels like the right balance of good test against good teams on the road, Tennessee team coming in later in the season, for a good non-conference test at home, but and some opponents that you can, it's kind of, I wouldn't say just like beat up on a little bit to get some continuity and some experience, but I mean, it's games that this roster should be able to win handily, and they can work on some things and get that continuity going. So yeah, it's a good mix for me. I agree with you there in terms of Texas being up towards the top of this Big 12 race, but man, the Big 12's crazy. And I know there's a lot of players that have left. There's been a lot of change in the conference this, past off season, coaching wise, and players coming in and out and everything. But it's still going to be a wild league, and that's where to think of Texas being in that top two, it's kind of like, God, well, if Texas is fourth in the league, is it still that crazy given what this conference has been made of the last few years? I don't know. It's gonna be another fun conference slate this year, though.
Well, and Mike, like you were saying, Tech being sort of on that outside of the top 25 looking in, I totally agree that they could easily finish in the top 25, be like a 5 or a 6 seed at worst going into the tournament. And that's not even, we're not even talking about, when you get down to a West Virginia or an Oklahoma towards the bottom, when you start entering the bottom half of this conference. This is still, the bottom of this conference is not great this year. There's going to be a clear separation. Just like in some of these years past, between the top 6 or 7 teams, depending on if there's injuries, and maybe you see if you see an Oklahoma fall off a little bit, or a West Virginia, if something goes wrong for Huggins and they fall off. But it's just, this is such a deep conference with a lot of great coaches, and it's going to be tough night in and night out. And that's where the depth comes in. on this roster is being able to utilize that depth and guys that get beat up from night in and night out and not expecting the same people to have to contribute every single week will be key for me. I mean, you look at it and would you be surprised, if like in Oklahoma State
No.
made a run in
No.
this conference and just got
No.
hot? I mean, that wouldn't surprise anybody really. Baylor looks a lot different than they did last year, but that's still a well-coached team. Say what you want about Scott Drew.
We will.
And we will. Trust me, throughout the season, absolutely. But it's still a well-coached team, and he's doing good things for that program in Waco, despite it being in Waco.
What's crazy to me is, oh yeah, sorry, Jay, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
What's crazy to me is you mentioned it, the bottom three, who are their coaches? I mean, that's crazy to me. Like the coaches on the bottom three are probably in the top 50 coaches in the country. Like,
yeah,
that's what's entirely crazy about. They're just more in a rebuild mode.
Yeah.
And I still project most of these teams to win 14, 15 games at the bottom of the league. And I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised if a TCU or an Oklahoma, surprises teams. We saw it last year too. I mean, so yeah, just a Big 12 conference that's going to be super loaded. So, but go ahead, Jay.
No, that was it. That's the point, is that it's from top to bottom. You still can't take a night off, I guess is the point. You can't, we're going to go to Fort Worth against TCU and half-ass it. Like, there's not going to be any of these games like that where, even an Iowa State team that just was awful last year, you're still not going to be able to. Yeah. Exactly, right? That's the type of thing that in this conference, if you walk in and you take somebody lightly and you get punched in the mouth early, you're going to have to fight to get a win and use that energy and use your resources that you might not have thought you were going to use. And that can set a team on a tailspin, especially one like Texas that might not have, even halfway through a season yet. I don't think this will end up being the case, but let's say that Texas maybe hasn't totally figured it out yet in terms of gelling together. And then, early on in the conference schedule, you go to a Kansas State at the beginning of January and you go to Manhattan and you have to really, really fight for a win that you should probably have had.
Great atmosphere.
Yeah. I mean, and and then you get Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, right? Back to back after that, who you got to go to Stillwater, and then you get Oklahoma at home. But still, it's like, you can't lose your focus in this conference, period. And I think the style that Chris Beard has, the expectations, Kerry, you really did. I'm really glad you touched on that earlier about the expectations that Chris Beard has laid out and will continue to lay out for this team. Is the type of coach that won't let a team lose focus. And if they do, he'll right the ship quickly.
Well, and also you're talking about a coach that's coming in that's extremely familiar with the Big 12 and how to win in the Big 12. You've got leadership or, upperclassmen that were on this roster last season that have been in these environments. And that's what, there's multiple people besides just the coaching staff. There's multiple players on this roster that can, basically you go into an environment like K-State or, West Virginia or any of these road environments in the Big 12, they could look at guys like Marcus Carr and the newcomers in and say, we know what it's like to go into this building. And if you don't have your head on right, you're going to find out what it's like getting punched in the mouth in these environments here with a team that wants to bring down at the moment, a top 5 program. And that's the thing. Like, this isn't like Chris Beard or, a different head coach walking into this program and being like, well, I'm just completely unfamiliar with the Big 12. I come from another conference, all these kinds of things. I don't know what these environments are like. I don't know what the coaching levels like, the talent levels. Someone could come in here and just go like, oh God, Iowa State, they look awful on paper. This is a team being picked last to go. And then they go up to Ames and they'll find out,
Yep.
And that's the thing, this coaching staff and the experience on this roster, have prepared this team to go into these kinds of environments. Will they get wins in all of them? No. It's just the nature of a conference this good and this deep. But I don't think they're going to show up looking like deer in headlights in any of them either. Because again, they've been through these kinds of battles. And this is a coach that I think understands this because he's been through them in this league as well. And they're going to go cold. And just like Beard has mentioned, we talked about it before earlier, that if you play good defense, you can find ways to win in these tough environments when maybe you don't deserve to.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you look at it last year, wasn't Tech like the finished 7th in the conference, I believe, and at one point they were in the top 10.
Right.
So, I mean, last year was absolutely ridiculous. This one's kind of come down a little bit more to earth, but I mean, it's still going to be a super challenging league. So, I mean, expectations, guys. You guys keep having me on these preview shows. I don't know why you guys do this, because I say something I say something that never happens. I'm 0 for 3 right now so far. So I'm hoping Beard can at least go 1 for 4 here. But yeah, I mean, it's to finish in the top 3 in the Big 12. I mean, you should get to the Sweet 16 and you should challenge for a Final Four for me. And, the recruiting trail's heating up for Texas right now. So there's a chance here to do some pretty special things pretty early. And I think there's a window here to really take advantage of, kind of the perfect storm kind of happened here with the Beard hire and the transfer portal.
Yeah.
Kind of these different things that are happening. So what are you guys' thoughts on realistic expectations and kind of what may happen?
I think, in my mind, I think I'm right there with you. I think compete in the top 3 or 4 of the Big 12 regular season wise. Who knows what happens in the Big 12 tournament? And I think this is going to be an NCAA tournament team, obviously. I think Sweet 16 is a decent expectation to have. I think getting out of that first weekend of the tournament, getting to a Sweet 16 is, I think, where this program should be this year. Bounces can go any way, as we talked about. Like, the tournament can be crazy, weird stuff happens. I don't know, I don't think I'm not going to say like, oh, this should be a Final Four team. I mean, I think getting to a Sweet 16 would be a fantastic season. I think it lays a great foundation, and we'll see. I think the ceiling can go beyond that. I think this team is capable. The coaching staff is capable of making a deeper run than a Sweet 16. The floor for me is losing in the first round of the tournament. I think even if this team is at its floor throughout the regular season, it's still a tournament team. But I think a first round loss or round of 32 loss is probably the floor. So for me, that's not that much of a margin. The difference between losing in the first round and getting to a Sweet 16 is 2 games. It's but yeah, I think they'll be up towards, the top 3rd of the Big 12, and, we'll see. I mean, there's a lot. This team could do some really interesting things this year.
Mike, you mentioned a lot how once you get to the Sweet 16, it's all bets are off. You're basically you either have a great roster or you're one of the hottest teams in the country at that point, or both. Once you get to the Sweet 16. So, anything can happen, Kerry, like you said, too. I think a very reasonable expectation is to get out of the first weekend for this team.
Yeah.
I don't think that is too over the top. I don't think that this is a thing where you look at the amount of talent on this roster, the amount of sort of, I guess, what you expect as a coach out of Chris Beard. I'm looking forward to seeing how he'll get this team to gel, because I do think early on we're going to see that this will be a well-oiled machine. I'm not saying they're going to go to Gonzaga and get that win, but I don't think that we're going to be talking in a few weeks and saying, damn, man, like, they got a long way to go.
No,
because I don't think that's going to be the case. And I think we're going to see consistency out of this team. I think we're going to see, and Mike, you kept mentioning that this is a good college basketball roster. It's not necessarily, there'll be some guys that play at the next level, sure. whether it's the NBA, go to the G League, go to Europe, whatever. There are players that will play professionally off of this roster. But my point is, sorry, I didn't realize that my volume was on there. My point on this is we're going to see some consistency that we haven't necessarily seen in the past, week in, week out, game in, game out. And that's going to be what carries this team through a tough Big 12 schedule and hopefully a long run in the NCAA tournament, because the talent's there. There's a reason why, depending on who you ask, whether it's Andy Katz or Ken Palm or any of these rankings, why Texas is considered a top 5 team in the country. There's always that caveat, like, well, this could be a top 2 team if,
Right.
you know, and I think we're going to see that if happen. And it's going to be a fun ride this year to watch. Again, whether it ends up Gonzaga is great. Like, Mark Few is a great coach. Kansas, you know, we didn't really talk a lot about Kansas. They're Kansas, man. Like, they're gonna be good. Villanova's gonna be up there. My sort of team to watch to sort of wreck this whole thing is Memphis, with the recruits that they've brought in. The conference that they play in is not the toughest. It's going to allow them to sort of, again, it's the same thing that Texas is looking at doing early in their schedule. Memphis is going to be able to sort of work through a lot of their kinks throughout the entire season and find what's going to work best for them. If Penny Hardaway can figure out a way to push the right buttons on that roster, like, Memphis is going to be dangerous. And then, yeah, absolutely. That's the other one for me is Kentucky. You never know what you're going to get. There's just so much talent, and the coaching there is, and you know, Baylor won the whole thing last year. I know their roster looks different, but you can't totally discount that. Duke is Duke. Like, there's some good.
Yeah, Coach K's last year.
Yeah, so there's some extra motivation there, and all that. There's the farewell tour everywhere they go, sort of thing. There's going to be that. Yeah, no
So
kidding.
Good riddance.
Let me ask you guys this question. We asked it in football, right? And I think we're kind of seeing. I asked, who is the most important player that you're going to watch, and who's the guy that, if he has a great season, really vaults this thing into a Final Four. So, I guess if I'm looking at it, I think for me, how Timmy Allen really plays in this offense at that 4 spot is going to be super important, and how they utilize his playmaking ability is going to be super important. As far as like the ceiling of this thing, the floor for me is if Trey Mitchell struggles defensively, I think this team is going to maybe not see a Final Four potential. So who are some of those guys that really set the high bar, and those guys that could potentially kind of create some issues, as we've seen with like football, where like Overshown going down, and you saw what happened there. So who are those guys for you?
I think for me, the player, I kind of had this feeling about Anthony Cook coming into the football season, was like, if this is a guy that starts to play at a high level, that he can really make a difference. Mm-hmm. For me, it's Febris.
Yeah.
I feel like if Febris is a guy that basically becomes a player that you can't take off the court, that this team is doing some really special things. Because I think we kind of know like what we're gonna like. I mean, for me, it's like, okay, well, if Marcus Carr goes down, and like, okay, that's a huge loss that's gonna set this team back. But like, if I think we kind of know what we might be getting out of these guys with Mitchell and with Carr and Andrew Jones, like if Febris is a guy that can cement his role in the starting 5, and he's hitting those big shots, and he's doing, like, to me, that is what's going to put this team over that hump from like a Sweet 16 team to a team that can really push for big things, like bigger things. And he's the one for me that I'm watching. I think he's going to could be extremely crucial to this team's fate this year.
So I'm in the same yard as you. I'm going to say Courtney Ramey, because if his attitude is right, if his game is right. And for me, I would almost rather have Ramey off the bench. I've said that before. I know Febris is like, he's the microwave. He's the instant offense when you need it, just to you shoot the lights out of the gym. But Courtney Ramey, we talk about everybody that's been brought in transfer portal wise. And I think the most important guy to the success of this team will be somebody that's been here. And Courtney Ramey, the emotion that he plays with, it's just, if he's on and his head is right and he's doing the things that he's coached to do, because Beard is going to coach him like he's never been coached before. And I think he's open for that. And if Ramey accepts this coaching and fulfills his proper role on this team to his fullest potential, that to me is the guy that's going to be the biggest difference maker. Maybe not statistically. I'm not saying I need Courtney Ramey to average 18 a night. I need Courtney Ramey to be the best Courtney Ramey that he can be for his role on this team. And that to me is going to be that he's the one to watch for me in terms of fulfilling his potential and helping to ensure this team's success. For sure.
I think it's interesting that the guys that we're talking about are guys that are upperclassmen that have been on campus for a long time, and we're still talking about like these ifs with them. And I think that I don't want to get too much in like an indictment on the previous coaching staff, but I mean, I think it is. We've mentioned this like related to football about these guys that have been on campus for a while that are like, if they can put it together. And I think that says a lot about where the program has been, but also about where Beard can take this thing. We talk about like the potential of guys like Ramey and Febris and, these guys that might not have the national hype, but that we've seen the flashes from them. And that if this coaching staff can get the consistency, get their heads on right, have them locked in on a night-to-night basis, I mean, forget about the guys that have been coming in as transfers. Like those could be, I mean, I don't know. I think this team is primed to do some big things, but I wanted to mention real quick, Jay, you mentioned like the ifs, about like, oh, this is a team that if this goes right can make a Final Four run, or if this goes right can be a national title contender. To me, that you remove those ifs with consistency and with time. We talk about Gonzaga and people aren't saying if they are, if things go right, they've done it. They've been consistent enough. And I think that's the most important thing for this program right now is the consistency on a night-to-night basis. And then you do that again next season and you do that again. And I think Beard's the type of coach that can remove that if label from this program to where it's not just like if they get hot and if they get breaks, they can get to a Sweet 16 and all that. Like, I think he's the coach that with the way that he's building this thing can say like Texas is a program that should be competing for Elite Eights and Final Fours on a year in and year out basis.
Yeah, that's why you bring him in, right? That's why you hire that. That's why you go to Texas Tech and you get the guy that a lot of programs would be thankful to have as their head coach. And when you see how pissed off people are when you steal their head coach, it's how you know that you got a good coach. It's the same thing like when you get a transfer in on the transfer portal and or an assistant coach in football, and they're like, oh God, the fans are burning down the message boards because you got that guard, or you got that offensive line coach or whatever it is. And when Texas Tech is like full scorched earth, like pissed off it because Texas has Chris Beard now. And that's how you know. It's how you know. I mean, I know that it's like if you date the prettiest girl you ever dated and then she leaves you for somebody else, you're going to be mad at that guy, right? And like Chris Beard was probably the best coach that Texas Tech ever had.
That's me.
Consistency.
I think about it from the other angle where Texas, hired Herb Hand from Auburn, and Auburn fans were just so thrilled to get rid of him. Yeah. And we're like,
yep.
This seems like a great hire for us. I don't understand why they're so happy to get rid of him. This guy's got to be an improvement over what we've had before, right? And then we come to find out like, Auburn knew.
Man, exactly. that road game at Tech though. Are we going or what?
We might have to.
How much are tickets going for that at the, like,
Dude,
what is
it's
it?
gonna
be-
What's the name of that place? The Tom Thumb Arena in Lubbock, or like,
I swore I'd never go back to Lubbock after I went in like 2003, 2004, whenever it was. I didn't
it's a
even go to a game. I
good
just
good
went
way
to
to live,
Lubbock.
by the way.
I just went to Lubbock. And I swore I'd never go back. But this, this would be something that I might consider it for. But that's going to be a crazy time.
Currently
So.
on SeatGeek. Hold on. Let's look at the cheapest price to get in here.
I'm going to guess 150.
You'd be wrong.
More?
Oh yeah.
350.
There's some for
I
that.
wanted to go to the other.
There's some.
What do we got?
There are currently only 6 tickets available on the resale market. 6. The cheapest one. It's a set of 2, and they're like upper deck looking type thing there. $231 a pop. SeatGeek rates that as a great deal.
It's never a great deal to pay anything in Lubbock. So I mean, let's
Does this include
back that up a little bit.
include the private jet and hotel from?
Yeah.
And or not even that, just back and forth. Like, don't even have to stay up there.
Oh yeah, nobody's.
This is a
staying in
seat on
Lubbock.
CDC's plane.
Right.
That's
Let's
amazing.
do it. 231. Well, I'm not surprised. That's going to be a good one, and this is going to be a great season. It's fun to be able to have these discussions and to actually have expectations that while last year we had them, and it was really a shame that didn't work out better with the roster that there was on this campus. To that the nail in the coffin, losing in the first round of the playoffs for Shaka, it's disappointing, and it feels like these expectations this year with a head coach that's been there and done that before. It does feel like these expectations are realistic, and anything less than getting out of the first round of this big tournament for me, I think I will be disappointed. But I just need to see that consistency, because even last year, even though we felt so good about this team, there still wasn't that night in and night out consistency that I think we're going to see from Beard this season.
Well, and I'll say my last piece here on the expectations part to go off that, and we'll let Mike close this thing on out for us. But like, I think for me, the expectations from last year to this year in terms of like wins and like the actual raw expectations aren't that different. But I think the feeling around it is different. I think last year it was like, if Texas doesn't meet these expectations, like this was kind of the last shot to meet those expectations. Where this year it's like, we can meet those expectations, but it's just a more positive kind of feeling around the program in terms of like building something bigger, where it kind of felt like last year, like it kind of was like, if Texas met those expectations last year with Shaka Smart, like that was kind of the ceiling for it. Like it didn't feel like it would go much beyond that, because we'd already seen a few years of inconsistent play. So it's like, hey, they might get hot and make a run in the tournament, but we can't rely on that happening again the following season. Where now this team can meet those expectations and then continue to get better, because I don't know, it's just a different feel with this coaching staff and the way that they've built this roster. So
yeah, I guess for me, super disappointing last year. I just don't know how that happened. And you look at that was one of the most athletic front courts that has really been put out there in quite some time for like any team. I mean, good Lord.
I don't know. I don't know if I'd put Abilene Christian up there, but
yeah, seriously. I think the thing that we need to see from Beard to separate from Shaka is going to be the in-game adjustments. And just putting his players in the position to be successful. Jay, you hit on it. It's like Courtney Ramey. He could be a great college basketball player, or he can be a thorn in your side as a coach. So which one are you going to get on a consistent basis, I guess, is what we're looking for. Whereas the Shaka teams, you had just, you didn't quite know what you were going to get. You knew the ceiling was really high, but the floor was really low. And I think the floor here is really high, and the ceiling is even better for this year's roster. So I'm looking forward to it. I'll be catching a bunch of games this year. So And it's a lot of excitement and buzz around the program, which is what we've been wanting. So
Yeah, man. Close the Irwin Center out with a bang.
yeah,
Like a good one, not like.
not like an
Yeah.
explosion, not like an explosion.
Well, it'll be imploded. I
Yeah.
mean, the thing is, the building will be imploded anyway. But like, at least like finish with some kind of positive note before moving into the Moody Center. But
Yeah.
well, I'm excited. It's gonna be a fun season. I think it's gonna be an interesting one to follow, and we'll definitely be talking about it here. So
Yeah, I mean,
guys,
there's a reason that this is the first time that I've ever bought season tickets for anything. Like we're in, and we're gonna be there, and we're gonna bring it to you sometimes live from the drum. So stick around. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Nice.
Appreciate y'all.
well, thanks. Yeah, thanks y'all. Thanks for tuning in. And yeah, there we go. It's time.
It's time.
Worked out perfectly on a bye week here. To make sure to tune in at 11 a.m. next week for Texas at Baylor.
More
Set your
kegs
alarm
and eggs,
clocks.
baby. Mike,
We'll be here next
we
week to talk
appreciate
about it.
you. We appreciate you, Mike.
Thanks,
for joining
guys, for
us,
having me
man.
on. Yes, sir.
We'll
Thanks, guys.
go.
We'll see you next week.